I'm very much of the mind, like, we don't know what the astrology is how it's gonna unfold until we get there, because we're changing all the time, or we're growing all the time. And so how can I grow myself in this moment to then meet that astrological imprint with the best of what I can bring it?
Hey everybody, Marianne Williamson here, and thank you for joining me for my podcast this week. We're living in an extraordinary time, an amazing moment of phase transition as one world is literally disintegrating. One geopolitical, biological, emotional, psychological, economic, social world is just sort of crumbling to the ground, creating a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, both in our personal lives and also in the larger structures, stress within the larger structures of our civilization. But at the same time, there's a sense of something new being born. And that's always how life works. Anytime one phase ends, it's the beginning of something new. And so we are called to two tasks. One is to be a midwife for that which is dying, and one to be a midwife for that which is struggling to be born. Women's stories have not always, in fact, hardly ever been at the center of languaging, how we talk about the larger world outside ourselves. Now that women are telling our own stories, we should be able to tell them in our own ways. And one pattern, which is very, very important to all human beings, but certainly to the experience of the woman, to the experience of the female, the experience, however that is defined for anyone in their gender identity, etc. today. It's the idea of pregnancy, that we conceive a child, then that gestates within us. We are pregnant, and when the time comes, we go through labor and we give birth. Well, that is as true for a civilization as it is for an individual. And yet, when it comes to giving birth to a new world, you're talking about human consciousness as the womb. We're talking about the fact that we conceive a new idea. We conceive a new possibility. We conceive a new perspective on the way life could be lived. And then that gestates within us. And that is what is happening now. We are reconceiving the world, because the world as it is dying. That which is struggling to be born must be reconceived, conceived anew. And that's our job today, in large part, to use our own imaginations as the womb out of which this new world will be born, to conceive, to imagine a world in which there is no war. JFK, President Kennedy said, "We will end war, or war will end us." But we've stopped even trying. We need to bring our imaginations to bear upon the process of being responsible for the 21st century, to allow ourselves to even imagine a world in which there is no war, in which war has become a memory, that war is just something you you read about and study about and look at in museums. To conceive of a world in which there is no poverty, which, by the way, is eminently possible. Given today's technology, all of the skill sets that exist, we could, as people like Buckminster Fuller and other futurists have proven, we could have a planet in which everybody is fed, in which everybody has adequate housing. There is so much unnecessary suffering that doesn't have to be. And so it's our job to come up with new ways of bringing forth the new, but we will not be able to bring forth the new through the auspices of an old conversation. We have to bring to bear the intelligence of the heart as well as the intelligence of the brain if we're going to formulate a new way of being. And that's why people are expanding their sense of not only what's possible, but the language, the lens, the filters through which to imagine, articulate, and bring forth what's possible. This newness is everywhere. It's in everything from agriculture to business to science to medical to healing. It's even struggling to be born in politics, although I certainly know the resistance of that institution. But every institution resists the new until the moment when the resistance simply itself cannot hold, and new conversations, new ways of doing things are then brought forth. Well, some of the new ways are actually old ways. Because what people talk about sometimes is this extraordinary modernity is actually a mirroring of things that are pieces of very ancient knowledge and very classical religious and spiritual traditions. And one of the old things that's become new again is astrology. I've always been interested in astrology ever since I was a teenager, and the older I get, the more wisdom I see there in terms not of, predicting what's going to happen next Thursday, but in terms of a psychological system that gives us insight into who we are, who other people are, and also into how our relationships with other people can turn out. It's so interesting because sometimes we act like nobody had an inner life until recently. Well, even like when someone like Jesus says, my kingdom is within. The word psychology didn't exist. So whether it was Jesus or it was Aristotle, whether it was Buddha, whether it was any ancient philosopher or technique, people had inner lives long before we thought about the inner life in such strict mental, psychological terms as we do now. So many things where some very old sources of wisdom, things that have been around for thousands of years, might have more to offer than one might think. Certainly the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, did people's astrological charts when he would deal with them in his practice. And one of the interesting things, in addition to that, is that the founders of the United States, Benjamin Franklin was a Rosicrucian. In those days, astrology is one of the gentleman's arts. And I have something to say about that with my guest today. In December, there was an astrological event called the Great Conjunction. And somebody sent me an article by a contemporary astrologer named Chani Nicholas. You might have heard of her. She has a book out called You Were Born for This. And somebody sent me an article, and there was by her, and there was a paragraph that really got my attention. Let me read it to you. Years like 2020 have us straddling a gaping chasm, one that asks us to bear witness to what is decaying, while at the same time tending to what is emerging. Our systems are archaic and long overdue a reconstruction. In true Aquarius fashion, we must leave enough space between our personal attachments and the needs of the collective in order for the most innovative ideas to emerge. Aquarius is the antithesis of Leo. It decenters the ego. 2021 asks us to think beyond ourselves, beyond the herd mentality, beyond the binaries we've been forced into. We must face our fears of exile in order to access the wisdom of the healer, teacher, sage, witch that lives on the outskirts of the village. This is the exact opposite orientation of those that have all the privileges in society but still claim they're being victimized when asked to consider the group's needs. That is a false exile, a vain attempt, and a deeply destructive stance to take when we look at the problems we face as a planet. Well, when I read that, I not only saw such an alignment with my own thinking, my own writing, etc., but also something very personally meaningful was in there, where it says we must face our fears of exile in order to access the wisdom of the healer, teacher, sage, witch that lives on the outskirts of the village. And boy, do I know about it. Because when you start talking the wisdom of the healer, the wisdom of the sage, the healer of the witch, you will be exiled by the elite establishment within our society today. But that elite establishment in so many ways is part of that which is falling away. That our willingness to talk language, our willingness to use concepts and words that might be laughed at by the establishment doesn't matter. We need to do it anyway. We need to face our fear of exile. And as someone who was exiled within a certain context, I know, you know what, you live through it. And you know that you are still part of that which is being born, and that is what matters. Now, some people, because the society is moving forward, if you look at the career of my guest today, Chani Nicholas, she's being embraced because society moves forward. If her work was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I think the idea of the kind of pop, the pop astrologer, even though there were certainly people and continue to be people that we're all very interested in, whether it has to do with Susan Miller or Colin Bedell, we were all many of us grew up on the words of Linda Goodman. I mean, this stuff has been around for many of us for a long time. But today, what is happening with Chani Nicholas that's so interesting is the way the larger popular culture is willing to embrace her and to take this wisdom, partly because she does speak also in terms of social justice issues. She marries the two. And of course, that is close to my heart. Anybody who's taking the ancient wisdom and marrying it to contemporary circumstances, that's right up my alley. So I'm so excited to have Chani Nicholas with us today. I have a lot to ask her about. And a little preview I want to tell you. I was asked by her team, would I want her to do my astrological chart? But that's exactly, I've had my astrological chart done enough in my life. But even more than that, I don't really want to talk about my astrological chart in front of all of you. However, I think I went one better, and I asked her to do the astrology chart of the United States of America. Here's Chani Nicholas. Chani Nicholas, thank you so much for being with me. I'm grateful that you'd be with me on the podcast today.
I'm so incredibly excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoyed your book, and particularly enjoyed that article that you wrote about the Great Conjunction. Mm-hmm. And I had spoken of it a bit. So this is exciting for me to have a chance to talk to you. Mm-hmm. Obviously, everything old becomes new again. Astrology is kind of in a whole new way, but your personality and the way you present it sort of matches this moment, particularly the way that you put together astrological insight with social justice issues and so forth. I think a lot of people, when they think of astrology, think in terms of me. What's my sign? What's my chart? But I like the way that you take it to a bigger place. And that's always been of interest to me. I've always been interested in astrocartography. I think the astrology of places is so interesting. I know you were educated in San Francisco. You live now in LA. I always thought it was so fascinating. San Francisco's a Virgo. LA's a Leo. I always felt like San Francisco's a little embarrassed by LA, but LA doesn't really think about San Francisco. How perfect is that? Right? All those things. Russia's a Scorpio, the United States Cancer. And of course, I asked you to do the chart. So anyway, I know you have so much to say, and there's a lot we can go with the things that I just threw at you. So take it wherever you want to go. And of course, I do want to get at some point to the chart of the United States.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that I arrived in Los Angeles in 2005. And back then we had CD players in our car. And I had a whole stack of your CDs. And I would drive around LA with no air conditioning in the valley. And I had waitressing jobs that I just loathed. And it was in those jobs and in my commute to work that I would listen to you and listen to your voice. And I think that I received so much from your work. And it was in those restaurant jobs that I learned how to pray, and I learned how to do that kind of work. And all of that work then eventually, of course, showed up in the astrological work that I do. And there was this really amazing moment where I had when I was asked to come on this podcast, because it was in this one restaurant in the valley, which was a very strange place. And it was really hard for me. And again, I would just be doing the prayers and the kind of affirmations that you would give and that are also in the Course in Miracles. And one of my people that came in one day was Lily Tomlin. And it was the only time I was ever starstruck. I was like, I can't believe Lily Tomlin's here. And then when my book came out, it hit the New York Times bestseller list the moment I went to go read Lily Tomlin's chart for Netflix. And so when you reached out to me, your people reached out to me, I was like, what a moment, because you were just in my ears that whole time. And then to meet her in that time, and then to meet her again, 10 years later, was like all of that kind of parallel living happening at the same time. And I felt like this is me then and now, and there's really no difference. But people like you buoyed me, carried me through that time. So I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you. And I'm grateful to you for telling the story. It's a great honor. Yeah. Makes me happy. Makes me very, very happy.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what you're talking about. And so thank you.
Yeah. It's amazing
So
to
that
have
was,
that through line.
yeah. And now you're here, and now you are
Yeah.
doing for others what you felt I did for you. And the circle continues, and the pattern
Yeah.
continues. The
Yeah.
wise woman emerges, often mentored by the woman who is older. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
this is ancient
Yeah.
archetypal stuff, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I really love, that you
Yeah.
talk about that. You talk about the emergence of the wise woman. You talk about the fact that the sage healer witch is she lives on the outskirts of town. She's connected, but not quite connected. She's got one foot in each world, and in order to really enter into the system, you have to face your fear of exile. But
Yeah.
you're living at a time now where you don't have to be exiled. So,
Right.
how do you feel about things now? How do you feel about careers like your own now? And how do you feel about where we are as a culture?
Well, careers like mine now are, now they're moving into the mainstream. So it's a strange kind of moment. And I think it's also, again, just really important to always be referencing back how we got here. I didn't just end up here like by happenstance. So many people paved the road before me. And I got the summation of so many people's wisdom and work and real like reverence for learning about the past being passed down to me. So I feel incredibly lucky. And we're living in a time where, everything is available now. Like I didn't grow up with the internet. So the ways in which I came into contact with wisdom was very different. It had to be through like specific humans in my life. And so now we're living in a time where folks can just go online and find all that. And so I feel like it's a different type of integration that's happening, and that the knowledge is so readily available. And we still need, I think, in-person teachers and healers and folks that can help us really ground what it is we're consuming all day long. And it's a very different kind of scenario. It's like folks have a lot more knowledge, and we still need ways to be embodied with it. And I think that only really comes through being in relationship. So that I'm always kind of sitting in that kind of place. Yeah.
Well, you get a transmission from a human being that you can't get from a computer. On the other hand, the transmission from the human being often comes technologically. Like you said, you listened to my tapes.
Yeah.
So you were getting it through technology, but it was a person who was transmitting. I mean, we can feel that on a telephone. You can feel so much feeling just talking to a person. So, and like you're saying, it's all available, but still there's available just reading it, and then there's available through the transmission of a human being.
Yeah.
These are old patterns, and astrology is wisdom that has been transmitted for thousands of years. And one of the things I talked about before you came on, Chani, is that the founders of the United States, I've always been fascinated by these sort of metaphysical beginnings of the founding of our country. I'm fascinated by the fact that the Great Seal of the United States is the Great Pyramid of Giza with the Eye of Horus on top, Novus Ordo Secloros, New Order of the Ages. And also the fact that when the Constitution was written, of course, the birthday of the United States being July 4th, and then they wanted a grand trine. Clearly, this was deliberate, the grand trine between the birthday on July 4th, the fact that the election is always, the first Tuesday after the first Monday, which means it will always be Scorpio. And when the Constitution was written, it was March 4th that would be the inauguration of the President of the United States. So there was Cancer, Pisces, and Scorpio. Now, I don't know if you know this bit of historical lore, but Franklin Roosevelt, who I think we can assume was not into astrology. He said, well, we really don't need that much time between the election in November and the inauguration of a president in March 4th, on March 4th. So he moved it to January 20th, which in this last case, for instance, like with this last president, thank God it was a shorter period of time. But I thought that was so fascinating that they knew what they were doing, and they took that into account. So where are we? I asked you to work on the chart of the United States. Where are we now?
We are in the great Pluto return of the United States chart. And Pluto has an orbit of like 240 years. So humans don't have a Pluto return, but nations do. And if we look at the archetype of Pluto, then Pluto is always about underworld journeys. And so it's always about the shadow and the revealing of something. It's always about power, because underneath the earth lies so many resources. And deities that are underworld deities often have something to do. They govern some kind of wealth. And also, of course, a death and rebirth kind of transformation. And so the fact that the United States is having its Pluto return, really, we could say that it began in 2008 when Pluto entered Capricorn, the sign that the United States' Pluto is in. And if we look back to 2008, of course, it's a very important year that was marked by a lot of, the United States had a lot of very defining moments happen in 2008. And in the system that I use, whole sign houses, Pluto is in the second house of the US's chart. And the second house is about money, wealth, property, and resources. And so since 2008 and until way after 2022, but 2022 is the exact conjunction, the United States is having this uncovering of its resources. It's the power that lies in its resources. But also within that, of course, we have to always say, how did we get here? And how did we get the resources we got? Why do we have the money, power, et cetera, that we have? And of course, that this nation is built on stolen land, and because of the theft of human lives and human labor. And so our resources, the United States resources, have had so much to do with slavery. And so the whole reckoning that we might say is happening now, or hopefully is happening now, but the uncovering of the impact of slavery and of enslavement of people, I think is a major factor of the United States Pluto return. So that's one piece.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of destruction as well as rebirth with Pluto, correct?
Yes.
I remember the AIDS crisis. There was, I think, Pluto in Scorpio. And there was a lot of conversation about death and rebirth through sex, right? Sexual disease, et cetera. Okay, so Pluto in Capricorn, very much about material structures, money, power, et cetera. So there's death and rebirth within our material structures. But then you said the Pluto return is over in 2022.
It starts, that's when it's exact. And then Pluto will be in Capricorn for another couple of years, but it will be waning. So we're moving towards the peak of the Pluto return. And so there's a reckoning, there's an unveiling, there's a kind of, it's like you pick up the rock and you see all the creepy crawlers underneath. We have to get down to the roots and into the underbelly of this country and this country's economics and how it's always functioned. Right. And so, of course, I don't know, I could be totally ignorant to this, but I don't know another time. It's not like, well, I don't know another presidential candidate who's ever spoken about, oh my goodness, the word's escaping me, about reparations.
Reparations, yeah.
Right?
Well, because I was coming from the place that you just said, we have to uncover. It's like our emotional, psychological, cultural, sociological healing is just like physical healing. Things have to be detoxed. Things have to come up in order to be released. You've got to get the poison out. You've got to tear this stuff up by the roots. So yes, and of course I would assume that the political establishment as it now exists represents the Capricornian nature, which isn't having any of it. Right? But isn't it interesting that Biden is a Scorpio? And I think, I could be wrong, Chani, but I think that more U.S. presidents have been Scorpio than any other sign.
That's a good point. I know that a lot of U.S. presidents have very prominent Cancer placements.
Sure, because of Cancer. And Gerald Ford was a Cancer, yeah.
Yeah, and Biden has a very powerful Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter functions really well in Cancer. And so his kind of like, we're all good and the American people can all kind of get on the good page is very his like Jupiter and Cancer kind of vibe. Yeah.
Now, when you have this period where, and this is what's so fascinating about astrology, I think that's something else that a lot of people don't realize. It's not predictive. It's here is what the evolved aspect of your personality would do with it. Here's what the primitive aspect of your personality would do with it. Here's what the spirit would do. Here's what the ego would do. And you see this in the United States. As a country, we have the nurturing aspect of Cancerian, and we also have the thin-skinned self-reference that is the downside of Cancer. How do you feel we're doing, and how do you feel that astrology can be most helpful to people now, both personally and culturally? What is the wisdom of astrology right now? First of all, there's what you just said, that we're living at a time where we have to dig deep. And that's true for us as individuals as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at, if you look, well, it's like, are we going to purge the poisons and come to terms with the shadow and come to terms with the pain and the suffering and the damage that has been done? Or will we let it take us down? Like, I think that's the question of the country in this moment. And if you look at the cycles of other Pluto cycles, you get to also understand how we might be aligned with it. So it's always really important to say, well, when was the last time this happened? Or how did this occur in other countries or other nations? And what was going on then? And Ray Grass did a really interesting article for the Mountain Astrologer where he was looking at the Pluto returns of England. And in the second Pluto return of England, Elizabeth I came into power. And that was known as the Golden Age. But that, of course, was when the slave trade was formalized. And so that was their second Pluto return. Now on their third Pluto return, because that's how old of a nation they are, in 1801 to 1810, that was when they abolished officially the slave trade. And so as the United States, as a kind of limb or an extension of at least the founding of the country moving away from that, but then it's all, connected to colonization, and that as we're having our Pluto return, we're coming into this moment of reckoning. And all last year, last summer, last spring, the United States was also having eclipses on its ascendant. So
what is our ascendant? I can't remember.
Sagittarius.
Oh, wow.
So the freedom and the, the place of great expansion, and this, we have this persona of being this incredible epicenter of freedom and expansion and being able to think and believe in what you need to and want to and all of that. And as the eclipses were happening on the United States ascendant, the Black Lives Matter protests were happening both here and around the world. June 5th was when the eclipse happened on the United States ascendant, and that was actually Breonna Taylor's birthday. That is Breonna Taylor's birthday. And that was happening at the same time as everything was going on. And so we're looking at the patterns of how things happen and when they happen and where they happen. And so we can look at it as a nation and we can look at it personally, but it's always important to say okay, this thing is happening, what's occurring as a parallel to it or as a mirror to it, as above, so below kind of. And then when else has it happened and what has that meant for this person, place, or thing?
So you talked about in England and how when Elizabeth I became queen, slavery was formalized. So I'm sure that something in the chart of the United States would have been very dark, obviously, when the first slave ships were brought to the United States, which was in 1619. That was, of course, before we were United States. Yeah. And then I'm sure the Civil War, I'm sure there's some amazing astrological significance to the Civil War, to the abolition of slavery. I'm sure that there was as well to the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. I can't even imagine the astrological chart of 1968. What about now, though? You said that we have the opportunity to uncover, to look, to atone, to repair. And I would think that this is not just in the area of race, it would be the area of how we've treated our earth, how unfettered crony capitalism has been so destructive in all manner of our functioning. And I would think that crony capitalism would be the downside of Capricorn, right? It's pure material force without any kind of conscience or soul. So what stands before us, and what do you see happening? Are we up to the task? I mean, are we going to carry this forward with the high side of our souls, or what's going to happen? I know
I
we're
don't
not
know. I
supposed to be
guess that's
about
up to
predict.
What are we going to do?
Yeah. Oi. Well, the two women who are the sage healer witches on the outside of town aren't supposed to be looking at each other going, all right, what are we going to do? Well, we're both working within the Capricornian systems, bringing forth the wisdom, the high side. One of the good things about that, of course, is we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. By the way, what is your sign?
I never talk about it publicly.
Oh my goodness. And yet I was asked and yet I got 2 or 3 requests from your team asking if I would have my chart done, but you don't go there. That's very interesting.
That's only because sometimes the people spring it on me less in the interview, and I just like to be prepared. But I loved your response, actually. I just kind of, privacy, da-da-da.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said about my own. But I am fascinated by what's happening in terms of the larger culture and how we as individuals take this transformation and allow it to prepare us. I think there's something about our own personal, obviously very profound about our own personal transformation and what how it prepares us to be transformers in the larger culture.
Yeah.
Do you feel that this period of uncovering and having to dig deep and all of that in a way was made more necessary during COVID because there really wasn't anything to do except go deep? What are your thoughts about COVID from an astrological significance? What is this pandemic?
Well, you mentioned the AIDS epidemic, and that happened at the last time Saturn and Pluto came into a conjunction.
Right. It was Saturn and Pluto, right? Mm-hmm.
Saturn and Pluto came into a conjunction, and that's exactly what happened in January of 2020.
Okay.
So the last time it happened was the AIDS epidemic. The next time it happens is COVID. And so we look at these patterns and say, okay, this is a time that's going to be marked by a major global event of understanding and coping with death. What happens with Pluto is that it can also magnify whatever it touches. And so it was magnifying or, putting focus on the Saturnian aspects of life, which is all of the old outdated systems, but it's also about restriction and confinement. And so we spent a year in lockdown. Like if there's, I don't know, a more Saturnian term than that, it's that Saturn just makes you stop.
Locks you down. Mm-hmm.
And so I think people really got astrology in a lot of ways last year because it was so literal. And it was also transforming I'm not saying it's transformed our economics, but it was a moment of economic restraint and downturn and looking at how our economics also function. So it was like another kind of iteration of this Pluto return for the United States. But of course, then it was also this global moment of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that was so important. And you mentioned Richard Tarnas before we started recording, and he has an incredible book called Cosmos and Psyche, which talks about these major astrological patterns. So through the civil rights movement and all of the different, major kind of world events. And he, explicitly said in that book, which was written decades ago, that this is a configuration that can, symbolize like plagues or, major kind of health crises. So that's what we're still coming out of, I feel, as a globe. Like and Saturn has moved from Capricorn to Aquarius, which in traditional astrology is still its rulership. So it feels like this 5-year period of significant restraint and significant Saturnian boundaries. And also we've, as a globe, I don't think we've ever had this moment of kind of like severe isolation or having to grapple with something kind of all at the same time. And so what will come out of this with is yet to be known, but it's definitely shaken our systems and made us understand something that's much deeper and much more serious that capitalism cannot grapple with. It's not equipped to handle the severity of what happens when people are in need of care and a system that, is only for the people who are the strongest within it can't function, or it functions, but the people within it can't. And so I feel like it was the exposing of a lot of that. And we spoke so much about it in ways that we hadn't for a long time, I think.
So you referred to this as a 5-year period. So when would that 5-year period be coming to a close? And then what comes after it?
Yeah, so Saturn will leave Aquarius in 2023, I believe, in the beginning of it. So we're closing to the end of it. And then what comes after it is, it's Saturn will move into Pisces. It'll be much different. It'll be much kind of more, it's like Saturn and Pisces is kind of like a non-solid form, like a jellyfish almost or something. So it's going to be a lot more fluid. But I think we have to get through this moment to figure out how that might process. This year is really marked by the Saturn-Uranus square or Uranus square. And the first square that happened was when Texas had an energy meltdown. And Uranus is in Taurus right now, which speaks about what you were talking about earlier, the Earth and the major changes that the Earth is going through. Uranus is a planet of changes and upheaval. And so the resources of the Earth and the ways in which we have worked with them, and capitalism has extracted from the Earth to the point where it is so unstable, we've never been here before. The first time that Saturn structures and Uranus, which can have to do with energy, but also the Earth's resources, came into this conflict signature, which is the square, the power shut down. And we had the markings of a major systemic, crisis. And so that's going to happen two more times this year, once in June and again in December. And so we'll look to see what kind of markings are made in terms of our power, resources, and our structures. Saturn's like the grid, right? And Uranus is like the surge of energy. And so the literal energy grid collapsed. And so I think it's a, foretelling of the kinds of things that we're going to be having to deal with this year before Saturn leaves Aquarius.
Well, of course, Texas was known for its political trend of deregulation, privatization. It was all about the every man for himself type of mentality, and that being at the core of the kind of capitalism that was practiced there. And of course, it did not take care of the whole. It was not collaborative. It was very much about, everyone out for themselves so that only a tiny few make it and everybody else can fly to hell with you because I'm off to Cancun. We've mentioned capitalism. Yeah, really. So you've mentioned capitalism twice. So do you, obviously, capitalism wouldn't be ruled by a sign because we can't look at the day it was born, although maybe we could talk about Adam Smith. I don't know how you feel about that. But I'm wondering, since you talk about it so much, do you see capitalism as something that is dying or something dying to be reborn from a sort of unfettered capitalism, deregulated capitalism that became so prevalent starting in 1980, which was opposed to the capitalism before that? Do you see death and rebirth within capitalism, or do you see death of capitalism and the birth of something new?
I mean, the more radical part of me would like to see something new, but the part of me that's aged this much, I don't know how quickly that can even come about. And so I feel like we'll be working through the end game of it for a long time. And I don't know what the rebirth will be. I don't know what it will move towards, or if this will be it. If some part of our civilization will crash under it, and that will, be how everything gets a kind of reboot. I know that humans, we like to kind of be extremists sometimes and almost think of there'll be an end but I don't even know if that will be it.
I don't even think it's an accurate portrayal of what's happening. Human greed is the problem. And people act like if only we got rid of capitalism, somehow all greed would disappear. And that's simply not true. Right. All economic systems have their own high side and their own downside. So I think when we look at any economic system, we want to ask, is it inherently toxic? Is it inherently poisonous? Some people feel that capitalism is, but some people feel that it's not. That just like everything else in astrology and everything, there's what the spirit could do with it. and what the ego would do with it. And what the spirit could do with it is clearly that we are moving towards a more collaborative time. You know, you write in your books and in your articles very eloquently about the fact that we are moving to a time when it's about the herd. It's not just about you. Will Pisces, the age of Pisces, help us get there? I mean, this is bigger than capitalism. This is really about the cosmos, and is about the human psyche. Is that the impulse? I mean, clearly it's the impulse of nature because it's unsustainable not to do that. But do you see astrological forces that are actually helping us get there in terms of becoming the people that we need to be able for the human race to evolve?
I mean, I hope so. I think that I try to stay in the moment more so. You know, it's like, how can we encourage the best of us in this moment, in this choice, in this day, in this second? And I'm very much of the mind, like, we don't know what the astrology is how it's going to unfold until we get there, because we're changing all the time, or we're growing all the time. And so how can I grow myself in this moment to then meet that astrological imprint with the best of what I can bring it? And so it's like all of the choices we make up until that point, there'll definitely be quite when Saturn gets into Pisces, there'll be quite a Neptune, because Neptune will still be there, and but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to change us. Like, we have to be the thing that embodies the change first. And then I believe that if we were living in more accordance with the earth and each other, and, making sure people had, basic human needs met, then bad astrology would be rough, but it wouldn't be this bad. I think that it wouldn't land in a way that annihilates so much of our system, or so much of our relationships, or so much of our world, if we're better caretakers for ourselves and each other and the planet. And so I try to stay present, I think, is my answer with all of that, and hope that we can make the best out of what it is.
I had a conversation with the film director, screenwriter, and film director James Cameron the other day, and he said he feels that we're at a precipice point, and between being takers and being caretakers. We will either be takers, as we are with unfettered capitalism, extreme self-reference, et cetera, or caretakers of each other and of the earth. And it will make all the difference with where we go. Yeah. Tell me where the archetype of that woman on the outskirts of town comes in. What does that mean for the women? What does this mean? I mean, this has got to be some tremendously significant astrological impulse, that women have a public voice in a way that we have not had ever. Certainly in Western societies. And what is the voice of the woman, and what is the voice of once again, I keep going back to that, the woman on the outskirts of town? You mentioned in the introduction to your book that you didn't want to be part of the yoga industrial complex. That you get what happens when higher metaphysical wisdom gets co-opted by the capitalist system, and I've certainly seen it, and how people allow their more ecstatic, really wild woman vision be sort of truncated in order to fit the to fit the pattern, so that she won't be exiled. Talk about how you see that for yourself, how you see that for the culture.
There's so many ways to look at that. Demetra George does amazing work on the asteroid goddesses, and on politics, and on the combination of all of those. So I want to point people to her work.
Demetra George?
She's my teacher. She's one of the wisest women I know. She's incredible. And I look a lot to Lilith. For Lilith, we can look to as a point or an asteroid in the charts. So I think Lilith holds that, mythic place of being the one who was in the garden, and then who was the one who said, I'm out. I can't live in a place that doesn't respect me as equal to my mate, and who also rejects my ferocious, sexual, erotic, creative energy, and then is able to withstand the coercion and stay on the outside. So there's that way I can look at it. And then there's the way, again, to go back to the Uranus Saturn square that's happening this year, there's just there's a breaking through, I think. And again, I think that the Pluto Saturn conjunction that happened at the beginning of 2020 locked us down in a way that so much could then actually start to break through in the places and with the people that were able to not look, not see, not know. And so I do think this year is a continuation of that, being able to break it through and down. And, other than that, if in terms of, all people, all marginalized genders having a space in this moment, it's like the information age, like social media has, for all of the problems that it creates and all of the distortions that it has us in, it's given folks a platform that would normally never have it. And so there's been an amplification of so much. And we could link that back to certain transits astrologically, and also I think that that's helped so much to break through that like I would never have a career if it wasn't for the internet, because I wouldn't have landed a magazine job, or I wouldn't have landed in places that would have wanted me to conform, because I was raised by too many hippies and I just can't. So
because my career began before the internet.
Yeah.
And you would be doing exactly what I was doing. It wasn't the dark ages. We did have book publishing. We did have magazines. We did have those little cassette tapes you listened to in your car. wasn't that bad. It wasn't the Stone Age. But I do know what you're talking about. But I know that democracy itself is under the sign of Aquarius. Mm-hmm. So the idea that this aspirational yearning for equality, for the self-actualization of all people. I mean, I think that something really profound happened there in moving into a democratic paradigm where, even though God knows we've never fully manifested, we've never fully embodied it, but at our best, we've certainly tried. And our best, we've had some successes, but we've always been in the struggle between that angelic impulse and the worst, most violent aspects of human character. Is that somehow in the chart of the United States, that we are both those things, and that in every generation the two are at odds and struggling the way they do?
Yeah, for sure. Pluto is in Capricorn in the United States chart, and so it opposes everything in Cancer in the United States chart. And of course, Cancer is it's the home front, it's the security. So like all that homeland security stuff is just our Cancer, part of the United States charts, just like on blast. And so opposed from all of that, like Cancerian quality of caretaking and being secure, and this is our home and that we will defend it, is the Pluto. Is like, you have to deal with the other side of that. It's not just like the good caretaker that will, nurture and whatever. It's also the shadow part of that. And so there's that piece. And there's also, there's the United States has an Aquarius moon. So
wait a minute. So Cancer was Sag rising and Aquarius moon.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's
Princess Diana was Cancer with Aquarius moon.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is there a Mercury, Mars, and Venus for the United States?
Yeah. So Mars is in Gemini. So
Mars is in Gemini. We go to way too many countries. Way too many places. Yeah. Okay. We knew that. Okay. And what's Mercury?
Mercury and Venus are both in Cancer.
Wow.
And Mercury, the United States' Mercury just had the Pluto opposition. So like the first time ever. And that Pluto opposition was last April, I believe. So that's like again, once in 200 plus year opposition. It was Pluto. So it was April 25th. Was it? It was in 2020, at the beginning of 2020, that it had that. And, Mercury rules the 10th house of the United States, and that is like the public and the persona out there. And so during that early spring of 2020, when the uprising started to happen, was when Pluto was opposing the Mercury, the megaphone, the speaker box, the the one who communicates the message, and it was about our, public persona. And so that, again, that unearthing of the message that got blasted around the world was really poignant to watch.
You might not have been old enough or at a place in your life yet to be watching what was going on in the year 2000 politically. But during that presidential contest between Al Gore and George Bush, I saw written by several premier astrologers the phrase, I remember they're saying, it's very curious, the winner will be the loser and the loser will be the winner.
Because of Mercury retrograde.
Well, that's exactly what happened. The winner was the loser and the loser will be the winner.
With this election.
Wow.
So Mercury stationed direct on election day. So it was retrograde all the way up to election day. And it was the same thing back then. So it was like another iteration of that. And of course it was like such a messy election and it took forever. And all of us were saying like, we're not going to get results for a long time. And we knew that like before, but then once we got into COVID and then once we got into mail-in ballots and then once we got into all of the mess of it, all the astrologers were like, oh, that's why it's going to be so bad. But it was like a cousin.
Yeah, the drama of 2000 really was that it took so long. In this case, it didn't take so long. We just had someone who was insisting that it wasn't what it was. I remember when Bill Clinton was president. I remember in his second inauguration, I remember people I knew going, oh no, inauguration, moon void, of course, moon void, of course, moon void, of course. He's going to be impeached or something. And of course, he had some real problems in that second term with Monica Lewinsky. And all the astrologers were saying, see, we told you, moon void, of course. So, this conversation, I think, you were talking about Mountain Astrologer. I think that obviously, you are among some very, very fine astrologers who are working in the United States today. And if you have anybody, I know you mentioned Dimitri George, any other names that you'd like to put out there for people to look into, to use this as an opportunity to let people know about people doing really good work. Of course, you were talking about Richard Tarnask, Psyche and Cosmos. His book, Passion of the Western Mind, is incredible. Anybody else you want to put out, whose name you want to throw out?
There's so many people. Chris Brennan has something called the Astrology Podcast. He is an incredible researcher, an incredible astrologer. And that is a whole host of, it's like an archive of some of the best astrologers out there. And so through that podcast, you can come into contact with a million other incredible astrologers. There's a new anthology that's coming out called Mercury's Brood. That's going to be phenomenal. It's written by it's edited by a Black queer astrologer. And so it's going to be, focusing on more diverse voices in the astrological community. And through those portals, I think you can come into contact with some really fascinating people.
You mentioned sex and sexuality and gender issues and queer and all of that, and so much going on in that world. I mean, a fundamental change. Do you see any astrological significance to any of that? Everything that's emerging? I mean,
it's more about like taking moments and seeing Venus will retrograde later this year in December, and that will always bring about some kind of issue that pertains to gender and how we relate to gender. Usually folks with marginalized genders there's more prominence with, issues we might face around those times. Last June, May, June, Venus was also retrograde in Gemini. And so that was, through all of the protests around Breonna Taylor's killing that was also, I feel like it was very prominent there. So I'm always looking for women's issues, gender issues, LGBTQ issues, trans issues around times when Venus is having its retrograde. Which again,
what is the wisdom there? I mean, I understand that you're saying these issues are coming up. I mean, and we can see that these issues are coming up. But what is the astrological? I always think of astrology as saying during this time, it's kind of like at the beginning when you were saying, this is a time of uncovering. This is the time to go deep. This is the time to atone. This is the time to repair. What are the lessons on these other issues having to do with sex, having to do with, we've already talked about race, having to do with capitalism. You've talked about how with the Capricornian, the Pluto, the Saturn, something's been killed off. Something new needs to emerge. What's the newness that is emerging in terms of sex and sexuality? Is it just the fact that we are accepting such a wider spectrum of sexual possibility?
I don't, I'm sure people would disagree with me, but I think it's going back to something really early. I think that of course there was gender roles everywhere, but there's also, pre-colonization around the world, there is huge displays of gender diversity and relationship diversity and diversity of ways in which human beings interacted and connected. And I think patriarchy is really new, in terms of like it's been around for way too long and it's thousands of years old and it's done so much incredible damage. But I think in terms of being humans with each other, I think it's pretty new. And if we go, if we just go a little beyond that, and especially before colonization had created such a mark on the planet in the way that it did, like the later iterations of colonizations where cultures are wiped out and the people are obliterated. In those cultures, like in cultures from this land that I'm on now, there's tons of gender diversity and tons of relationship diversity. And so I feel like we're like, wait a minute, let's just go back, or let's retrieve the wisdom from the past, from the many different ancestors that we might come from, and think about and uncover what was already there.
Right. It's like when people talk about traditional family values, what people think of as traditional family values have been here for like a second and a half in terms of the whole mark of millions of years of human history that we know of. And we also know about matriarchal cultures, the uncoverings of people like Marianne Eisler. And but it's very interesting that you're talking about how in indigenous cultures, we know that there was a greater sexual fluidity and gender diversity wow. So you're saying Venus retrograde, for people who might not know, Venus retrograde means going back, and particularly in relationships. So when it's Venus retrograde, don't you see your old lovers more? Isn't that what that's really about? Well, you're married. Some of us are still like repairing some things from the past. You try not to.
I think that it's a review of how we relate to each other. And, it's a review of how we're in relationships. So whether that's with other human beings that we were romantically involved in or not, it's like, how am I in a relationship? How do I want to be in a relationship? And all of the intimacy issues that come up. Yeah.
So you've had a wonderful trajectory. You came out of, as you talked about at the beginning of your book, you came out of some very difficult childhood experiences. You talk about the sort of angels who met you along the way, individuals who showed up, gave you your first astrological reading, gave you a piece of wisdom here. You very kindly talked about my tapes that you listened to, and I'm sure there were many, many others who taught you things, etc. Are you happy with where you are now?
I'm blown away. Like I never pictured this for myself. I never thought I would have a business. I never thought I would have a whole kind of flourishing in many different directions thing. I always felt like I had a reason. I always had a lot of drive, but I didn't know where to put it. And, for me, it's been through the portal of a relationship, and it's been through the ability to integrate all of the different aspects of myself. But I have an app. I never thought I didn't know about apps back then also, but there's a way in which I've been able to.
I have an app.
I mean,
I hear
it's so weird,
I know what you mean. There's sort of bigger things going on for you than that you have an app, but I totally hear what you're saying.
I mean, it's very time consuming though. I will say that.
No, I hear you. I hear you. And you talk about when you met your wife as it all sort of came together. So there was, I'm sure that the astrological chart of the two of you meeting, I can only imagine, because that so often you use the word portal, and often relationship is the portal through which everything comes together, and sometimes it's the portal through which everything comes apart. If you could envision what you might see as the greatest triumph of your journey from this point forward, let's say 10 or 20 years, what would you hope for?
Oh, from 10 or 20 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
My hope is that the work that we do, the work that I do, is always building community, and that through that building of community, relationships are strengthened, networks are strengthened, safety nets are strengthened, and we feel less and less and less alone. And we feel more aligned with the creative possibilities of being in network with folks that we're aligned with. And it's very important that we get to do the things that we need to do. I don't think that there should be like there's some things that we want to do with the group, and then there's some things we really have to do as individuals. But feeling like we have a social safety net is so vital to our health and well-being. And so we're always, aiming with the company, with both our company and then with my wife's nonprofit, to do that, to keep building and keep having abundance circulated. And my way of experiencing the most abundance is to be creating it wherever we go with all of the people that we're working with. And so that's where I always want to be.
Well, you're doing a beautiful job of it in the present. And as you know, and as you spoke before, you create the future in the present. That's why you're so focused on that. And with the kind of intention that you have, there's no way the wind's not at your back. There's no way that the angels aren't pushing you from behind, that you're not accompanied by what Martin Luther King would call cosmic companionship. Many people have come into your life and said things that made all the difference at the time. Was there any one particular piece of advice that you got from a teacher, a friend, whomever, that you feel was that one sentence or that one piece of advice that has made the difference and that you never want to forget?
Probably so many, but what does stand out is my step-grandmother, who initiated me into Reiki and was like the portal for all of my kind of self-discovery in astrology. She had a really good friend who was a psychic. And I remember I was 14 and I went to go see him, and I was just all kinds of, suffering and wounded. And he just sat there with me for it felt like 20 minutes, just telling me I was going to be okay. And he just kept repeating it and repeating it. He was like, you don't know this yet, but you're going to be so much better than okay. Like, you're going to be just fine. You're going to be just fine.
Given what you have written about your childhood, a seer, such as a real psychic, a gifted seer who would have met you at 14, would have been profoundly disturbed by what he saw. Mm-hmm. And with the compassion in his heart, I can totally see why he would have felt moved to assure you that you would be okay, because he would have seen troubles that no one would have guessed, given that you were only 14, right? Mm-hmm. What a compassionate gift that was. Someone who could see that deeply and assure you that you would be okay. Yeah. Well, you're more than okay. And you're doing a lot to help other people be more okay. And I'm so grateful to you for being on the podcast. I will be looking you up on Wikipedia, so you can only hold your birthday away from us so
it's
far.
Not there.
Well,
listen, I'll tell you after we stop recording. I'll tell you everything.
Okay. And vice versa, actually. When people ask me, I say, I don't want her to talk to me about my chart in front of everybody. Okay. I think you're delightful. I thought you were delightful before I met you. It's interesting because it is in person, even though it's through technology. Yeah. I'm happy for the world, that the world has gotten to know you. And I truly hope our paths will meet again. Thank you.
Me too.
Very,
Me too.
very much.
Thank
God bless you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Blessing. Full circle moment.
So that was my conversation with Chani Nicholas. I thought she was lovely. I think it's so fascinating the way there's this renewed interest in astrology in some places where maybe it had not been so accepted before. People see it as a system of increased self-awareness when we allow it to be. And I think that that's a good thing. I think people are realizing this is something way bigger than what's going to happen this week. It has to do more with what are the particular forces driving me? What are the dynamics that inform my patterns in this lifetime? And how can I most creatively align with them in order to be of greatest use and service on the planet? So she's great. Chani Nicholas, check her out. And I'm also going to check out some of the other astrologers and podcasts, et cetera, that she mentioned. Okay. So now it's time for Ask Marianne. Thank you for the questions that you have sent in. Remember, you can send me questions at marianne@castmedia.com. So let's dive in. First, I have a question from Debbie. Hi, when both of my kids were born, 34 and 36 years ago, I remember shouting out, asking for the exact time, thinking ahead of their charts. That's pretty funny, actually. I'm sure a lot of women have done that. I did that, actually. I remember, what time is it? What exact time is it? Absolutely. For their first birthdays. I got their charts done and loved it ever since. My question is, do you believe it's an accurate blueprint of their life path? Thank you. And I love you, Marianne Williamson, and the impeccable quality of your voice and what you espouse. Thank you. Love and light. Thank you, Debbie. So this is how I see astrology, and I think we mentioned this a little bit in the conversation with Chani. There is no good or bad in astrology. This is the invitation of this moment. This is what your spirit will do with that aspect of character. This is what your ego would do with it. This is what the evolved aspect of the sign is. This is what the primitive aspect of the sign is. I'll give you an example. I'm a Cancerian. I have all the good things of Cancerian. I want to feed all the babies. I talk about hunger all the time. We got to feed all the babies. And also, Cancers are deeply, deeply sensitive. And it's almost like there's a thin membrane. I'm very sensitive to what other people are thinking and feeling, and I almost like get there a half a second ahead. Other people, I definitely see the high side of Cancer. What's the downside? I can be thin-skinned. Hello, thin membrane. What's the positive? Your deep sensitivity to other people. What's your negativity? It can be a little bit of all about me. It can be a little bit of, like I said, thin-skinned, taking things too personally, because you feel things deeply, and this can be very powerful and good, but it can also, when used by the ego, make you a kind of pain in the ass. So, hello. I see in my moon in Capricorn. What is the good about moon in Capricorn? Well, moon in Capricorn is I work hard. Moon in Capricorn is I just keep going. I just keep going. What's the negative? I can appear a little stern. I think maybe I can be a little stern. And sometimes, I feel like sometimes when I'm not smiling, people say, what's wrong? Well, nothing's wrong. I'm just not smiling. But with that Capricorn moon, which is a little cold for a woman, actually for a moon sign, it can seem a little stern. There's no good or bad there. But it is very helpful to know certain things about yourself. I have Mars in Scorpio. That means I love it or I hate it. And I'm trying to mature out of that. But I've moved too quickly at times in my life, been too passionate about the yes or the no's. That's the downside. But the upside of passion, if you learn to ride it and you learn to be mature around it, has its obvious upsides. So I'm sure as you read your child's chart, and I always felt that way with my daughter. I'm Cancer with Gemini rising. She's Gemini with Cancer rising. So we have, in addition to the profound connectivity between parents and their children, and the fact we can just zero right in on each other, we also have that Cancer-Gemini thing. But she's got moon in Aries, and I've got moon in Capricorn. Square. And you know what? It's always been there. It's always been there. Sometimes, the goat and the ram. We sometimes link horns too. So astrology is helpful. And I don't see it as predictive. I don't see it as determinative. But I see it as a kind of profound psychological system that's been around for many thousands of years. And one of the things that I've definitely come to learn in my life, like right now I'm rereading Anna Karenina, Tolstoy's profound novel about a woman and her obsessive love affair. Well, sometimes we think some of the things that are new, I mean, he wrote that in the middle of the 1800s, right? So a little bit later than that, I believe. My point is that people were dealing with some of the things that we're dealing with most now. People were dealing with hundreds of years ago, sometimes thousands of years ago. I was reading a book of quotes by Cicero the other day. Cicero lived during the time of Antony and Cleopatra. Oh, wait. There's an astrology story that I was going to mention to Chani Nicholas, so I'm going to mention it to you. Darn. Okay. Because I wonder what she would have said, but I want you to know this. So there's an incredible book, which is the a biography of Cleopatra that came out several years ago. I think it's called Cleopatra, A Life. It won the Pulitzer Prize or the National Book Award that year. I can't remember which. It's by Stacy Schiff. It's an incredible biography. I had no idea we knew as much about Cleopatra as we do, how much historical record there is. And, this woman's life, this was the end of what's called the ancient world. I mean, this book was mind-blowing. But one of the things that was so fascinating is, okay, she was the most glamorous woman, not physically that beautiful, which is an interesting thing about Cleopatra. Also interesting about the first line of Gone with the Wind, Scarlett O'Hara said, Scarlett O'Hara was not beautiful. So some of the women in history who have been the most magical beings have not necessarily been known for their physical beauty, but there was something, an allure, a glamour, whatever was before. And clearly Cleopatra had that. Okay. Who was the stud of the time? Mark Antony, right? And who was the powerhouse of the time? Julius Caesar. So Cleopatra had both those guys. Cleopatra had it really going on with a lot. But she and Mark Antony, one of the great love affairs, one of the great power couples of all time. Now, Julius Caesar had a nephew named Octavius. And Octavius he wasn't a very charismatic guy. And he was a little pimply-faced kid, is how he was described. No charisma, no anything. So when Julius Caesar died, there were, whatever the issues were about his inheriting from Caesar some element of power, but it was understood. It wasn't going to Octavius. It was going to Mark Antony. Everybody knew the power was going to Mark Antony. So here you have this incredible power couple, Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Well, they went to an astrologer, an Egyptian astrologer. And you know what the Egyptian astrologer told them? You'll have everything you want, but watch out for Octavius, because you'll never be able to defeat him. He will always have power over you. Stay away. And they laughed because they were Mark Antony and Cleopatra. The idea that Octavius, this little 18-year-old kid who had nothing going for him, could ever threaten their power seems beyond unlikely. Well, he defeated them both, obviously, and then had all the power and lived to be an old man, whereas neither one of them lived very long lives at all because of the tragic ends to their lives because they were defeated by Octavius. So I always thought that was one of the most interesting astrological stories. Now, I sort of got off the track from what Debbie was talking about, but you get my point. That's how I see it. Reading my daughter's chart, reading my own chart, reading anybody's chart. It doesn't tell me who a person is going to be. It doesn't tell me who I'm going to be. But it tells me particular invitations. You can be this really good thing, Marianne, or you can give into your ego default positions and go the other way. The choice is always ours. So the way I look at astrology, for things above the bottom line, I think it's fascinating, deep, meaningful, profound. It's not the bottom line. The bottom line for me is, dear God, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say and to whom? And as long as I stay aligned with that level of devotion, then I will always be the best aspects of my chart. Okay. This is from Alexandra. Hi, Marianne. Thank you for the important work you're doing with the podcast. Thank you. And for the opportunity to participate in these conversations. I strongly believe that our society is experiencing a rebirth and that we are socially evolving. How do we use the principles shared of higher consciousness to specifically support the end of poverty and homelessness? Well, one of the things that we talked about with Chani today during our conversation is that we are moving into a more collaborative mode of being. We have to move into a more collaborative mode of being, or literally the species will not be able to sustain itself. We are behaving, because of our extreme selfishness, greed, self-reference, and so forth, we are behaving with such lack of reverence for life, such lack of reverence for the earth, such lack of reverence for future generations, as to be on a maladaptive trajectory, which, once again, will be unsurvivable for the human race. Love is the answer, but it's not just a personal love. The love that will save the world is not just love for my children. It's got to be love for children on the other side of town also. It's got to be just as much love for children on the other side of the earth. Same with the earth itself. It can't just be love for my home. It's got to be love for the home we share, which is the earth. So the issue can't just be whether or not I'm in poverty. The issue's got to be the existence of poverty. It's not okay. It's unnecessary. The fact that I'm not in poverty is old think. The fact, well, I'm not living in poverty, so I'm okay. That's old think. New think is, but somebody's living in poverty. And it's unacceptable. It is morally unacceptable. And same for homelessness. One of the things we talked about in my introductory talk today was that we are reconceiving the world. We are moving into a new place of possibility. And that is because we are thinking for ourselves, what do we want the world to be? And it's so important that we remember, as I said earlier, it doesn't have to be the way it is. We can look at what is and go, that's intolerable, that's unsustainable. And I'm not on the earth to be okay with this much poverty. I'm not on the earth to be okay with this much homelessness. I'm not on the earth to just be okay with such intolerable conditions for so many billions of people on the planet. Remember, we have 1 billion people on this earth. 1 billion, they're called the bottom billion. And they live on less than $1.25 a day. And then there's another billion on top of that who are still living in deep poverty, but not that level of deep poverty that leads to starvation, such as 12,000 children on the planet starving every day. So when you ask me, how do these higher principles pertain? They pertain because they know I'm on the earth to be a light which casts out this darkness. I'm on this earth to help, to be part of the co-creative healing, impulse towards healing. And it begins with enough of us saying, well, that's not going to do. I have to tell you a story. You might have seen this. It was on the internet. And if you haven't seen it, try to find it. It's about a little girl, and she has a lemonade stand. And she's 9 years old. And I don't remember her name. It was on the internet. I posted it on my Twitter, so you can see it on my Twitter. And she said she has a lemonade stand, and she's selling lemonade because she heard that there are homeless children. And so she was speaking. She's only 9 years old, and she was saying to her parents, she was explaining to the reporter why she's doing this. And she said, well, my parents told me that there are homeless children. And then she said, I'm telling you, she's 9 years old, and she went like this. She went, yeah, I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. A 9-year-old, like, yeah, that's not going to happen. That's how we all need to be. That's not going to happen. And this is why I feel so strongly also about women in the Western democracies. If we just said this needs to stop now, it would. So when you say, what are the principles of higher consciousness, I'll tell you what they're not. They're not, well, it's okay. No, it's not okay. Love is fierce. Love can be fierce. Love sets boundaries. Love can say no. And we all need to be like that little 9-year-old. That's not going to happen. And when we become that way about homelessness and poverty, when we find that aspect of selfhood, things are going to change. Okay. Thank you so much for listening this week. I want to thank Austin Kendrick. I want to thank Lauren Selsky and Amanda Elliott and Wendy Zoller and all of the people at Cast Media for helping us put this all together, our team. I hope that you will check us out on iTunes, rate, review, subscribe, check us out on YouTube. You know what to do, all of that. And I hope that there's been something in today's podcast that has been for you a conversation that matters. Have a great week. I'll see you next time.